So I lost both of my legs first below the knee, which at the time I wasn't actually that upset about. What I was bothered about was a few weeks after that when they said, we're going to have to take your arms. If not for the obvious reason that there's a significant lack of independence when you lose your arms, but also because I was a musician at the time and I was a guitar player. And so that was just a part of my life that, even though it wasn't the largest part of my life, it was probably the only one that I genuinely enjoyed.
In 1837, Horace Mann created the education system, a system at the time designed to pump out factory workers and professors. The same system that is still being used today in the 21st century. Now, Mann's system is backfiring. We are being moulded by the same industrial system that has existed for close to 200 years. That system delivers us into a digital economy that has no need of our outdated skills. This isn't our teachers' fault. This isn't the government's fault. This is due to a rapidly changing world full of technology and unforeseen circumstances. And us Gen Zs are caught in the middle. Welcome to the Driven Young podcast, the podcast for stressed, overwhelmed young Australians, teaching you practical life skills you can implement now to set yourself up in life. And now your host, Byron Dempsey.
Welcome back to the Driven Young podcast, and today I'm joined by an incredible man, Tom Nash, aka DJ Hooky. At 19 years old, Tom was enjoying his life, studying university, when all of a sudden he contracted a rare disease. 2 weeks later, he woke up from a coma with the decision to either amputate his hands and legs or die. Today, Tom is a quadruple amputee with hooks for hands, hence the name Hooky. He is a promoter and a DJ, as well as a public speaker, having done a TED Talk with over 2 million views. In this episode, Tom shares his story, what happened to him, what was going on through his mind. We talk about opportunity cost and how we post-rationalize our decisions, how to know what to do after school, the nocebo effect, partying, traveling, the education system, mindset stuff, and so much more that is just scratching the surface. As you'll find out in this episode, Tom is a really smart guy, and this is one of my favorite conversations. We cover so many important things in this episode. I really hope you can commit to listening to the whole thing. As per usual, please DM me on Instagram, DM Tom, leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you enjoy the show. I read all of them and I appreciate it so much. If you're feeling a little lost in life, I would love to invite you to a new project I'm working on and I've been working on for a few months. Head to www.drivenyoung.com/IGY. That's drivenyoung.com/IGY. Now, over to Tom. Hooky, welcome so much to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Really excited about this episode. I have specifically avoided finding out your story, a bit about who you are, because I wanted to come in cold, so to speak.
It's easy to avoid.
Easy to avoid, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to get into some stuff around anxiety. You do a lot of public speaking. You're also a DJ and a lot of partying and stuff. So talk about that. But before we get into that, I'd love to know what you did after high school, kind of that journey after high school into the adult world and finding out who you are and everything like that, and everything in between. And what are you currently up to now?
Yeah, right. So, high school, after high school, I should say, I went to university like any other kid who's pressured into choosing a career path at the ripe age of 18. I decided on studying psychology because I was quite interested in that, still am to this day. But I studied that for only during the first year of university, and that's when I contracted meningococcal, which put me in hospital for about 18 months in total. And
wow. As in all at once, or was it like over a
year? All at once. So beginning to end, and it was a rough ride in parts, but a lot of the time was actually really great and educational, I guess, because you learn a lot about yourself along the way. Not just the physical adversity that you have to overcome having amputations, but you learn a lot about how you problem solve and adapt to your environment, which I think was a really important heuristic that I developed earlier than most people would be forced to. Chronologically speaking, I was feeling sick at uni one day, and I didn't go to any of my classes, and I actually just went home and put myself to bed. At the time, I thought I was pretty invincible because, I was a 19-year-old boy and all of them are.
Yeah.
So I think I called my stepsister and I said, look, I'm not feeling that great, but maybe in the morning, if I'm a little bit worse, you can take me to a doctor. But everything will be all right. And I went home that day, and I lived by myself, so no one was around to monitor me. I I felt like I had a really bad flu. Like if you've ever had a really bad flu, some like descriptions of COVID, like really bad descriptions of COVID sound similar to meningococcal. So I had headaches and neck aches, and I was like, what do you call it? Drifting in and out of consciousness quite a lot.
Right, yeah.
Felt like I had a really bad like congestion and a flu and all sorts of stuff, and I woke up in the middle of the night, didn't know where I was, crawled to the bathroom. I was really cold and I would have shivers and anyway, I woke up in the morning and I thought, this is not right. Like I should see a doctor. This is not great. But little did I know that I was pretty much on death's door. I would have been like, if I was 10 minutes late seeing a medical professional, I would have been dead. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I did actually text my stepsister at that point, and I was like, listen, you might want to take me to a doctor. I don't want to be dramatic, but I don't think I'm well. And she came up and up to my door and picked me up, and as soon as she saw me, her face dropped. And she was like, I'm not taking you to a doctor, I'm taking you to a hospital. Because at that point, I had had a rash all over my face, all over my body. And I'd swollen up a bit. And I basically looked like I was dead or about to be dead, which I certainly was. And so anyway, went up to the local hospital. I was living in Balmain at the time. And they pretty much had the same reaction. They were like, I think they even said, like, we're not the people to deal with this. We're going to have to take you to RPA. So I was whisked over in an ambulance to RPA. And at that point, I started losing consciousness. And then I was in a coma for like 2.5 weeks.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And
this all came out of the blue.
This all came out of the blue, yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, 24 hours notice, that kind of thing. And then when I woke up in RPA, it was a gradual wake up because coming out of a coma isn't kind of like, bing, hello. It's kind of, that's right. Like Bold and the Beautiful. It was you. It wasn't anything like that. Like, yeah. No. So it was like a very gradual wake up from a coma. And then I was sort of slowly learning what had happened to me, and I'd contracted this disease and all this sort of stuff. I couldn't talk because I had a tube down my throat that was breathing for me. And I hadn't had the amputations at that point because they were trying to save my arms and legs. But it soon became apparent a few weeks after that they were going to have to go. So I was transferred to another hospital, and I was put into the burns unit because apparently they treat your skin as though you had burns, which is probably appropriate because it looks like I've been burnt. And they did all the amputations. So I lost both of my legs first below the knee, which at the time I wasn't actually that upset about because I was in such a bad way that I thought, if this is going to fix it, let's do it. I'm pretty sure people can get around without legs. I was pretty young and wet behind the ears. I didn't really know much about people with a disability. Certainly not amputees. But I knew that people could get around in wheelchairs, and maybe there was a prosthetic leg thing that happened if people were bilateral. I'm not sure. But I wasn't too bothered about it. What I was bothered about was a few weeks after that when they said, we're going to have to take your arms. If not for the obvious reason that there's a significant lack of independence when you lose your arms, but also because I was a musician at the time and I was a guitar player. And so that was just a part of my life that, even though it wasn't the largest part of my life, it was probably the only one that I genuinely enjoyed. And so having that taken away from me would have been a huge blow, and was initially. So I deliberated over whether I was going to let them take my arms off, because I was an adult and I could make those decisions. And if I didn't want to continue on, if I wanted it all to end, I would have just not given them permission to amputate my arms, and that would have killed me. So I did have a choice at that point. And I eventually decided, let's take them off and roll the dice and see how that goes.
Yeah.
Went fucking great.
Wow. That's full on.
Yeah. So I went through, so it was about 6 months of acute care, I'd call it. And then about a year of rehabilitation, which was also done in a hospital, but that was sort of learning how to walk again, getting prosthetic arms and learning how to pick things up, pour a kettle, make a coffee, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I sort of started feeling a lot better once I was in less pain. I think I went through some dark periods mentally and emotionally, but I tend to think that they were all correspondent to underlying physical pain. because you're not really able to get your head around things if you're in acute physical pain. And so once that was alleviated, I was able to mentally work my way through stuff a lot better.
For sure. I mean, yeah, if you're in an incredible amount of pain, how are you supposed to be able to recover mentally?
Yeah,
it's kind of like you just need, first step, you need to be able to feel good physically, and then you can go, okay, let's work on my mental. And I guess, so after the 18 months, you're not in any pain anymore once the amputation.
Well, I'm not in acute pain.
Yeah,
I'm still, I'm still in some pain, but not a hell of a lot. Nowhere near as much as when I was in acute care or anything like that.
Yeah, in contrast to that. Yeah, wow. And so, what did you do after that? Did you go back to university? I should mention, hence the name Hooky, right? Because you've got your hooks for hands now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And how do you trigger those? Are they connected to a nerve?
They work no, they're not connected to any nerves. They're actually, they're just hardware. They go onto my arms and they strap up around the back.
Right.
And then this cord, it goes all the way around my back and it straps up. And so they work off resistance. So if I push my arm forward, it pulls on the cable, opens the hook.
Wow.
Release, and these rubber bands just keep them together.
Cheeky.
Yeah.
Very smart.
It's really simple. I think they were invented like 100 years ago for people who lost their arms in World War I, and they've still got these holes in them. You see that little hole right there?
Yeah.
That's for a cigarette.
Oh, right. So you can hold it perfectly.
Yeah.
Nice,
Which served me well for like 20 years when I was a smoker,
Awesome. So DJ Hooky, that's the name. And so did you go straight into DJ? Did you keep going to university?
Yeah, no, I didn't go straight into DJing actually. When I got out of hospital, it was a lot of learning how to live independently again, just general life stuff. And then I did go back to study, but I studied something different. I went back to study sound engineering. Because I had a bit of a life short moment. Let's do something that I really love and work out how to get paid for it later.
Isn't it weird that you needed an experience like that to do that, though?
I don't think you need it, but I did.
Yeah,
other people figure that out earlier than I did, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, you hear it all the time. Like even my mentor Brent, he's got a story where he got held at gunpoint at 18 years old. He was on his knee being held at gunpoint, and as cliche as it is, he's like, my life flashed before my eyes, and I realized I was taking the path of least resistance. I wasn't doing what I really wanted to do. I was doing what I wanted to do to please my family and to please society.
Sure, you're living someone else's expectations, yeah.
Exactly. And so you often see a lot of successful people, they always have this kind of like, oh my God, you only live once sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so you don't think you need that to be able to...
Well, I mean, I probably did at the time, but I think that people are varied, I guess. I think some people figure it out earlier, and some people just are lucky and stumble upon it.
Yeah, I think that's happened to me. I was lucky in that sense. I was looking for it, but I was also lucky, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and also I think that we are very good at post-rationalizing our choices and behaviors. So, I mean, we fall into something, we end up liking it, and then you think, well, this was what I always intended, right? When it's probably not.
But you look like, what's the opportunity cost?
Yeah.
It's like, what could you have been doing instead?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But, I mean, that being said, if you're enjoying what you do and you're loving it...
Absolutely, yeah. And with inspecting the opportunity cost comes at the expense of one's imagination, I think. So almost all the things that I've done in my life, if I took a different path, I wouldn't have imagined these as an opportunity cost.
Right.
Because they're so varied.
I totally get what you mean. Yeah. So, to explain what you mean by that, if you had taken something else, you wouldn't have imagined you had done what you actually did.
That's
so you
right.
wouldn't have considered it an opportunity cost.
Well, I mean, I didn't have any real working knowledge of what a DJ was until I became one. And so for me to think, I mean, it was a weird situation. When I finished studying at JMC, I was doing music, and I did some music business management course subsequent to the sound engineering. And I was quite close to one of my teachers, and he had a contact at an agency, a music agency for country music, who wanted to hire a head booker. And I actually went for an interview and almost took this job as the head booking agent of a fucking country music agency, right? And I sometimes think to myself, that the reason I didn't do that was, by the way, the week that happened, that I had a meeting with that guy, was actually the same week that I got the call from a guy from Club 77 who owned it, Michael, and he said, would you like to have a go at running the Saturday parties like you and Chris? And I was like, yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun. If that hadn't happened in the same week, I may have become a country music booking. I don't listen to fucking country music.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I like literally
Just
listen to
business side of it.
zero country. I mean, I don't hate it. And I think the weird thing about country music is like kind of one of those things that whenever you have like an oversaturated market in anything, the majority of it, you know, that which is not the tip of the iceberg is absolute shit.
Right, yeah,
And then
yeah.
there's a couple of things at the top that are brilliant,
Yeah.
right? I think heavy metal is probably the same. But I still have no working knowledge of country music at all. But I was going to be an agent for, you know, Lee Kernaghan, types like that. And if I did that and enjoyed it or post-rationalize my enjoyment of it, I wouldn't have even imagined the life of becoming a DJ and then all that sort of stuff. So that's at the expense of your imagination, the opportunity cost almost never plays out in your rational mind because you can't think of those things. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting. And I think it's just kind of the way the universe pans out. There's always random stuff that just kind of happens.
Yeah.
And it always, you know, whether you can say it happens for a reason or whatever you want to say.
I think the opposite to that. I think nothing happens for a reason.
Nothing happens for a reason.
My most hated axiom is everything happens for a reason because I'm almost certain that nothing happens for a reason at all. I mean, we can imbue meaning upon things that happen, you know, as much as we can be creative or as much as we can,
For sure.
yeah, frame it. But I don't think that anything happens for a reason at all. I mean, I don't even particularly think that we're that special as human beings or organisms or anything that's evolved on this earth.
It
But
just happens and whatever you make of it.
I mean, things just happen, you know what I mean? But yeah, exactly. You're allowed to imbue or tell yourself a different story about whatever happens, and that becomes your reality,
Yeah.
psychologically. So, I mean, it's not even useful to say that everything happens for a reason. It's actually counterproductive to have that thought process about it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you just said. Is however you perceive it, that then becomes reality. So, we're not saying, once again, if you see something and you go, "Oh, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me," you genuinely believe that's the best thing that's ever happened to you, and
Absolutely,
all
yeah.
the stuff starts coming out of it, then great.
Yeah,
That's a
because
win.
what's the reality at the end of the day? The reality is what your subjective experience of that event is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. But going back to, I guess, this whole hospital thing and this experience, I'd love to know, how did that impact you and your family or like the people around you? Like, did you lose your friends? Did you get new friends? Like, what was that experience like for you?
I did not lose my friends at all. Actually, my friends were extremely supportive, particularly my closest friends, some of which who were there with me every day when I was in hospital.
Wow.
Would visit me very regularly. And so were my parents as well. Like, everyone was really supportive. I think there might have been a few peripheral friends that had dropped off, not because necessarily of what had happened to me, but I think a lot of people find it difficult to deal with going to visit people in hospital. It's just too much for them.
Yeah.
And I did notice that I had a few friends that I wouldn't see as much, which I don't blame them for at all. Like, I think it would be not only onerous, but extremely difficult to see a friend going through that. But for the most part, yeah, I couldn't have had a more supportive group of people around me. It was good.
Do you think that played a big role into you be able to recover?
Yes, I do think that, although it's really hard to say in retrospect to what extent each aspect of your recovery is attributed to, whether it is your physical situation, whether it is the support networks around you, your mental capabilities. It's almost impossible to quantify. I know that it definitely would have been harder without them.
100%. Yeah, amazing. So you went back to uni, you did this, you almost became a country representative, whatever it is. And you ended up getting that offer to go to a party and run the party. And did you do that? And then...
Yeah, so a little bit of a backstory to that was that, as I said before, I'd been a guitarist in my past life. And I wanted to work out a way to play the guitar again. And so while I was actually studying that music course, I worked out a way to play the guitar again. So I actually designed a little slide that I would hold in my hooks and a little pick holder that I would hold in my other hook. And I converted my Stratocaster to like a lap steel and open tuned it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I play like lap steel guitar, but with a Fender Strat. And a couple of friends and I started a band together. And we used to play around Sydney, and I think we did even like a Melbourne tour once. We produced a record. We did quite well with it. I mean, just for, we're a pretty shit band, but it was
for a bunch of young
as they
kids.
always are.
Yeah.
But it was just fun, it was fun playing with your friends and writing music. And that was what was important to me, was like the performance and the writing was everything. And those were things that I hadn't done when I was a guitarist before. It was all just honing my craft and things like that, which, to be honest, was kind of stupid because that's not what I really enjoyed about it. So I got to do the things that I really enjoyed about it, even though I was never going to be Jimi Hendrix, which I wasn't going to be anyway, right? And in the process of doing a lot of those gigs around town, I'd created some contacts with some of the club owners. And one of them was this club in the Cross. And towards the end of my studies at JMC, we had to do some work experience. And so I hit up one of them and I was like, look, can I come in and just do any work for you? Because I have to do it as this, requirement. And this guy took me in and he was like, yeah, look, you can start helping run the Thursday night parties. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that involve? And it's booking DJs and promoting it and hiring door staff and making sure everything runs smoothly. And I was like, okay, it's kind of like the work of a promoter. And I got Chris in, who's my best friend, who was in the band with me as well, to DJ on the night as well. And then between the two of us, we were actually getting more people through the door than anyone else on that bill.
Right.
And we made their Thursdays, it was a Thursday night that I was tasked with running, more popular than their Saturdays. And him and I had been talking to each other, and we're kind of like, we could do this. Like we don't need this space. You know what I mean? Like between the two of us, we could.
They're not coming from the space; they're coming from you guys.
Yeah. We were like from our promoting his DJing. I didn't DJ at the time. We were getting a lot of people there, and so we would know all the people coming through the door. We would make a lot of noise about it, promote it really well, and so we kind of had that in the back of our mind. And then when we got the call to come and take over the Saturdays at 77, we're like, yeah, we kind of have a plan for how to do this already. So we walked into that meeting with the guy from Club 77, having absolutely no idea how to run a night, but thinking we knew everything.
Yeah.
Like we were super confident. We're like, we got this. We're going to call it this. These are going to be our plans, and that, probably bullshit. But he was willing to take a punt on us and was kind of like, yeah, fine, do it. Let's see how it goes. And so we started Starfuckers. And we thought at best it might last a couple of months, maybe 6 if we were lucky. But it was just something fun to do at the time. And so we ran it every week and people came. And then more people came. And then more people came. And then we get shut down by the cops. And then more people came and more people came.
Yeah.
And 12 years later, we were still running it every single week. And we'd been over 3 different venues at that point. We did Club 77 for 8 years. We're at the Tunnel for 2, and then home, the venue, which is where we are now still. And it was only a few years ago that we decided to move to less frequent events, not every week. But the DJing thing came out of that party because we didn't really have money to pay other DJs. Well, we had a band on, and that kind of blew our budget a little bit. And we will watch, Chris had DJ'd like a little bit before. I'd never DJ'd at all, but we had our opening night and was like, well, I could probably just get up like later and you show me what buttons to press and it'll be fine. And so he showed me what buttons to press and then got up there. And the set would have been horrible, I'm sure. But the night was packed, 600 people or something in a very small room. And everyone was having a great time. And I realized that it didn't really matter how we DJ'd because our disposition was so fun and lively that people just liked that. And we put a lot of effort into decorating the club and being large personalities and the faces of the party as well, which wasn't really a common thing around that time. You'd have the faceless promoter and then the DJs and, it very hierarchical in a weird way. Whereas we were kind of like a bunch of people that put together a party, but we're the same guys you'll have a drink with at the bar kind of thing. And that format just worked for us. And so I would DJ there every week, and so would Chris, obviously. And then we just got better over time because we're forced. We're just thrown in the deep end completely. We weren't the normal trajectory of a DJ kind of sitting at home and honing their craft and, finally making a demo and making sure it's perfect and then sending out to club promoters who don't fucking listen to it. We just completely skipped all of that. And we're like, well, let's see what happens if we just stand in front of 500 people. You learn quick.
Well, that's kind of my favorite way to learn, to be honest.
Yeah.
So there's that metaphor to jump off the cliff and build a plane on the way down.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's like, that's the best way I learn. Just throw me in the deep end.
Yeah.
And I'll figure out how to swim.
And I think to extend that metaphor slightly, if you hit every rock on the way down, it helps as well.
Yeah, yes. No, I honestly think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Because I actually did an episode with a close mate of mine who's a musician. and he was saying how he went to Paris and he lived in Paris for a few years, and he would work on music all the time, but he never released anything because he wanted it to be perfect. And then, he wanted that one song to change his life. And then, he kept doing that. He wouldn't release anything. Then he came back to Australia and he got on TikTok and he's like, you know what? I'm going to create a demo. I'm going to create a song a day and just release, 30 seconds of that song every single day.
That's a complete fucking opposite of being a perfectionist.
Yeah, he did the opposite. So he went from like, okay, this is clearly not working because I've had no traction. So I'm going to do a song a day. And then his voice got 1,000 times better because he was singing for an hour every single day. Yeah. And then he started building his profile. He started getting traction. And then as soon as people would go, we love the song. Okay, great. I'll turn this into a full song. And so it was like he could trial his songs to an audience.
It's like musical Darwinism.
Yeah.
He left it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the least amount of comments and likes.
It's
out
gone.
the door.
It's gone, exactly. Survival of the fittest.
And I think, but the funny thing about that is the fact that the atrocious nature of being able to put out content like that so many people kind of crave as users, I guess, that whether it's a good testing ground for whether songs are good or not, he's probably gaining more popularity than he would as if he perfected an album over 5 years anyway.
Yeah.
Even if it's the same result.
And the thing is, he's going to be way better because, as I mentioned, his voice got way better. So now his songs are getting way better because he keeps doing it. Whereas if you spend all this time on one song, you just start getting in your own head, which is what he was doing.
It's interesting because I've often thought about the perfectionist versus, whatever the antithesis of that may be called. And I've always thought to myself, well, maybe it's a balance between the two. Maybe it has to be good enough that you can release it and get feedback, or whatever the pursuit is. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is the complete opposite. Maybe you just have to put out almost everything you do and be completely open to criticism. Well, and I mean, if you can take criticism well, it works well, right? If you're not the kind of person that could do it, it'll probably kill you.
Yeah, the mental fortitude to be able to take, negative feedback.
True.
Well, it's not even negative feedback on social media. It's just hate.
That's true. Yeah. And also, if you don't have the mental fortitude to take criticism, if you're a perfectionist, it might be even worse because once you're completely satisfied with something, if that gets critiqued, you're fucked.
Whereas if you do if you do a song in a day and they say this song wasn't that good, you go, all right, well, I'll try again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or I'll try again tomorrow. Yeah. And the day after, and the day after.
Have you heard of the nocebo effect?
No.
It's, obviously, you know what the placebo effect is.
Yeah.
The nocebo effect is almost the inverse of that, where negative outlooks can impact outcomes in your life. So, for instance, I mean, perfectionist might be one example, but if you expected a negative outcome from something that you were doing, you might be less inclined to put in the work that requires it to become a positive outcome.
For sure.
And so it's closely linked to expectations, such that, they always say having too high expectations is a nightmare. And sure, it is true. But having low expectations can be equally as pernicious. Because so you need to kind of find that balance between the two where you remain positive but stay realistic.
Yeah, it's
which
a
is
good
very
point.
hard.
I did one of my best mates, the travel influencer, vlogger, whatever you want to call him. He just travels like Asian countries. He likes to go to third world countries and shine a light on them and stuff. Really cool guy. But he's just like, I found a lot of my friends and stuff when they're traveling, they often they don't have a good time because they set their expectations way too high. So I just go in going, all right, let's see what happens. And I think it is a balance of going, well, if I have no expectations, why would I be motivated to do it?
Yeah.
But if I have expectations that are too high, then you'll be disappointed when you get there.
Yeah.
So I think it is quite a balance of figuring out, what is it, the nocebo effect?
The nocebo effect, yeah. Have you heard of Paris syndrome?
I actually posted a video on this on TikTok. It went viral recently.
Oh, really?
You're
kidding me?
I think it got 500,000 views. It was the Japanese.
Oh, wow. Right? 500,000 views?
Yeah. It was,
who are you?
This is on... it was with that same guy I mentioned. We were
saying, right. Okay, cool.
I was saying how... in Japan, they often they idolize Paris a lot. They go to Paris and they get so depressed with it. There's actually a helpline they can call.
Yeah.
Because they get the expectations of Paris are so high that they get there and go, "Oh, this isn't what I thought it would be."
Because I think they think it's going to be like Disneyland.
Yeah, they do.
And it's
which is totally understandable. Look at American propaganda of Paris,
totally.
Or the Hollywood movies. It's always so beautiful. The Eiffel Tower. There's no one on there.
The interesting thing is they have a Disneyland in Paris now. So if you were Japanese and you were taking your newly married wife over there and you suspected that she might, have Paris syndrome, you could take her straight to Disneyland.
There you go.
And just tell her that's the city.
Problem solved. No, it's really interesting that. And a lot of the comments were interesting on that video. People were saying, yeah, Paris, most of the comments saying, they were agreeing. They're pretty much just saying Paris didn't live up to their expectations.
Yeah, the expectations of Paris are pretty high. But it's also like a very varied city. There are parts of it that are beautiful and quaint, and then there are parts that are really dirty, and that's not what you see in the brochure, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, and I do think it's a really good point, like setting expectations, figuring out that middle point. I'm not sure how you figure out that middle point. I think it's up to you and how you perceive things, but...
Well, I always, rather than trying to project what an expectation might be, I try to keep myself a little bit robust in terms of outcomes. So if things don't turn out the way I want, I'm not disappointed. At which point it doesn't really matter what my expectations are.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's like anti-fragility. I don't know if you've read much of it, Nassim Taleb's anti-fragility.
No, I haven't.
Which is predominantly sort of based around systems, but it works as an extended metaphor, I guess, with people, in that people become more anti-fragile if they're exposed to small stresses over long periods of time. And it's basically learning from adversity and making it work for you, like making yourself stronger in the face of adversity. And you become, people call it resilience, but I don't think it's the same thing, because a resilient person might be able to weather the storm, but they don't actually improve with small stresses, whereas an anti-fragile person would improve with small stresses. And so in order to do that, you need to find a way to turn negatives into, I don't want to say positives necessarily, but
learnings.
Some heuristics that you can develop that make you stronger the next time it will come around.
Well, that's what we say when we talk about like comfort zones, right? We kind of have 3 circles, and you got your comfort zone. You step outside your comfort zone, you're into the fear zone, and that's gonna be full of anxiety, stress, overwhelm. Okay, but if you push through the fear zone, and then we ask the crowd, now, do you think every time you push through the fear zone, it's going to be a positive experience? No, that's life. Sometimes it'll be good, sometimes it'll be bad. But whether it's good or bad, you're going to have a level of growth. Yeah. You're going to grow. Even if you completely fail and embarrass yourself, you're going to learn from that. And if you succeed, you're going to learn from that. So either way, you're going to have some form of growth.
Exactly.
So whether it's like, as you mentioned, whether it's turning a negative into a positive or turning a negative into a growth lesson.
Yeah. And I think more often than not, it's the latter. The best way I've always found to be able to separate the noise whenever you're in situations where you're fearful or anxious, I guess, is to really try to understand the biological response we have to fear. So the amygdala responses and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, how you feel when you fear things is akin to a smoke alarm in a house. You wouldn't want a smoke alarm that only works half the time if it detects smoke. You want something that always goes off when it detects smoke, and then you're able to detect whether the house is burning down or whether you just need cooking lessons. And so being acutely aware of our physiological responses to fear and anxiety helps in separating the noise from what's actually happening and trying to decipher whether we're being irrationally fearful or whether we're being rationally fearful.
It's a big one, irrationally and rationally. Because something I'm seeing a lot with young people is massive spike in anxiety. Absolutely massive.
I get it too. Like, I totally get it.
Oh yeah, I mean, social media, all these new things don't help, right? Bullying is now 24/7. It used to begin at 9 o'clock at school and finish at 3 o'clock. Now it's nonstop. It's it's psychological. It's subtle.
I'm actually hoping that bullying will go out of fashion. I think because it's so ubiquitous now, and there are so many it's so easy to bully people online because it's at your fingertips, that there will be less of a scarcity bias around bullying, and it will go out of fashion.
I'm not seeing it go out of fashion anytime. I think I don't know. It's really bizarre because I get a lot of stuff on TikTok of like stupid comments, like stuff you go, how, whatever.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize people were that stupid, to be honest. And I just didn't understand. I've never left a hate comment in my life.
You didn't realize people were that stupid?
Yeah.
How long have you been alive for?
I know. It's naive. It's cute. It's naive. But I underestimated the stupidity of a large amount of people.
Yeah.
Especially after seeing comments, not just on my TikToks, but like everywhere on social media. You see it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That was just something I completely underestimated. And I was just saying, I've never left a hate comment in my life. Like, if I see something I disagree with, I just scroll. I don't have to leave something saying, screw you, or like, I hate this guy, or whatever it is. It's like, just move on.
Yours is a protest of absence, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think, going back to the whole anxiety thing, are you seeing this with young people? Do you have any young people in your life you're seeing anxiety with? Why do you think this is?
I think I'm seeing anxiety in people generally, young people, absolutely, because they spend more time with technology.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why they might be experiencing anxiety disproportionately. But I think that everything that is at our fingertips, well, at your fingertips these days.
At our hooks.
Yeah, at our hooks is, it's weird because technology, I always think about, my hooks as an extension of myself. And they're a technology in a way. And our phones are also a technology, and they're also an extension of ourselves. So we're really closely linked to these things. They're almost like a part of us now, and more so with younger people.
And Apple Watch and AirPods.
Yeah.
I think Apple's releasing glasses or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Elon Musk said we're already cyborgs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Totally. Well, it depends where you draw the line. If we had a spade in our hand, I guess. But because we're inexorably linked to technology now, I think we need to have a lot more intentional relationships with the way that we use technology. We're coming at a bit of a crossroads now where the competition for your attention is reaching a point where companies are more likely to do unethical things to keep you on platforms. And they compete with each other for that attention.
Yeah.
If we're not cognizant of that, we will fall into a trap, and rather than being able to leverage technology will leverage us.
Have you seen The Social Network?
I have, but I think
documentary.
you're talking about a different one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the...
Tristan Harris, his the one that he features in.
Yeah, I forget what it's called. The Social Dilemma.
Social Dilemma. Yeah.
And so in the
I've been watching Tristan Harris for years. He's actually a fantastic speaker, and he's been tooting this horn for about 5 years now, and no one was listening.
Well, I'm glad he got that documentary because it went mega viral. But the point is, they say, hey, you can't compete with a supercomputer. You're competing with supercomputers to get your attention. Yeah. They know everything about you. They know all this stuff. They're going to send notifications at certain times. They're going to do all this stuff to make sure that you stay addicted to your phone, which gives them more money. It's like you can't think that you're going to be able to compete with supercomputers. So turn off your notifications. Get control of your phone rather than letting your phone control you. Yeah,
that's right. And I don't really see a solution for it, to be honest. I also don't see a solution for like the way that we use Twitter or something like that, in which it will sort of vindicate the most incendiary comment that comes on a thread or something in order to incite people or make some sort of incendiary argument that happens downstream of however the algorithm works, because that is a race to the bottom of the brainstem no matter which way you look at it. And even if you were to regulate, even if the government were to be able to regulate one social media platform, another's going to pop up.
Oh, for sure.
And if that's not regulated, it's going to outperform the one that's regulated. And so you have a little bit of a problem on your hands. So really the only way that I can see in the near future to combat this is for people to be completely aware and overly cognizant of the relationship they have with their devices and technology in general.
I think you just have to take ownership. You have to take ownership. You can't wait for something to come out to do it for you.
Yeah.
This is a big conversation I have with young people, because I think the average person spends like 7 hours a day on their phone, which is just insane.
Yeah.
Like that's way too long.
Yeah.
And even then I'm constantly, I make it easy as myself as possible to not get addicted to it. I turn off all my notifications. I even have my phone on black and white because it's less attractive when you don't have these vibrant colors popping in your face.
That's a really interesting that's a really interesting idea. I didn't even know you could do it for starters.
Yeah, if you've got Apple, you just go into your settings, hit grayscale, and then you triple tap power, and it goes from black and white to colors.
Wow.
And so, I made it black and white so that when I pick it up, it's not as attractive to like, oh, yes, what's this fun toy? Right. Your monkey brain's going, oh, look at this. And I do lots of other stuff, turn off notifications, especially because social media has been incredible for me. It's, I put out a lot of content on TikTok and Instagram, which has driven most of my listeners come from TikTok and Instagram. Yeah. It's been a great platform for me to educate people and get out this message. But I'm also aware of how toxic and addictive it can be. Yeah.
That's the thing is that you end up getting... You use something that might be, a calendar app or some bullshit that on the surface looks overly productive. But then what you don't realize is that even though that calendar app isn't as pernicious as the other apps, once you're on the phone, that's it. You get sucked into other things.
That's it.
So, do what you want, delete your social media or whatever it is. But at some point, if you're in that phone, it's going to get you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I do that all the time. I'll be like, oh, I've got to do this work thing. I go on there, bang, check Instagram. I get, oh, what am I doing again? I'll just check TikTok real quick.
Yeah,
5 minutes later, wait, why did they come on my phone? I'll put it down and I'll do it again. And it's like, oh, how are you serious? And I'm at an age where I can kind of recognize this. And that's where you go, well, what if you're 14?
Absolutely. And the weird thing that I keep hearing, which I don't agree with necessarily, is that people have shorter attention spans these days. I actually disagree with that because I think that's being misdiagnosed. Sure, people are watching things for shorter periods of time. I don't think that means they have shorter attention spans. I think that means the pool which they choose content from is so large that they don't have to give everything more than 10 seconds before they realize there's something better.
Yeah. And that's the effect that TikTok has kind of had because it's like 10 seconds to 45 seconds, really.
Yeah.
I know people who struggle to watch movies. Sometimes I haven't in a while, but I used to like struggle to watch movies because I'm not getting a shot of dopamine every 30 seconds. There's a scene that's going on for 4 minutes and they're just talking. It's like, how boring is that, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think this is all playing a huge role into anxiety for young people.
Did you grow up with social media? You must have. How old are you?
23.
Oh, you've grown up with social media.
Yes, but also I missed it from the important ages, I think.
Oh, yeah?
I had no idea what it was until I was like 13, 14.
Okay, right.
So all my childhood it was just PlayStation.
But you still were at an age when you got social media that you may have been subject to negative comments and bullying and things like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think it was a much more friendly place when it first came out. And it was a lot less features. And so I do feel like I skipped, definitely going into like high school, like going into, year 9, year 10, 11, 12, that's where, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. And it's not even bullying to a degree. It's more like, obviously it is bullying, but it'll be stuff like, I use this example quite a bit. Like if an older generation was at high school, let's say in like the 80s and 90s with no technology, there's a party on Friday night, you come to school on Monday and you go, oh damn, I didn't get invited to that party. That sucks. But now on Friday night, while the party's happening, you can watch 17 videos.
Watch the party happening.
You can watch it happen live. You can watch people having fun, and they're not showing the parts where they're crying because all this sad stuff happened and they're having mental breakdowns. They're just showing the parts where they're just having fun and they're doing shoeies and they're sculling drinks and doing all this fun stuff. And you're at home going, oh, this sucks. Then you go to school on Monday and they had a professional photographer there because it's only $200 for a professional photographer now. And there's all these curated pictures of the party. And so that's not bullying, but you can see just how social media can heighten the...
Yeah, you get FOMO.
Yeah, the massive FOMO experience.
I have JOMO.
What's that?
That's the joy of missing out.
Oh, joy.
When I see people like at the beach having a picnic, I'm like, so glad I'm not fucking there.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm home. You would love COVID then.
Yeah, I did, yeah. That's good.
Yeah. But what happened with you, I guess... So you got into the clubbing scene, you became a DJ, you started doing that. Then you got into public speaking as well. I know you're doing a bit more around that. And you kind of just touched on a few of the topics you like to talk about.
Yeah. So I kind of got into public speaking like almost accidentally. I had been asked over the years to give a couple of talks, and at no point were they ever refined. I kind of just would normally get up and speak extemporaneously to a group about my story, blah, blah, blah.
Like right now.
Pretty much, yeah. Without any particular insights into any topics. And then... I started getting a little bit more into it a couple of years ago. Then I was asked to do a TED talk, and doing TED was a really fruitful experience because the team there really help you refine an idea and a speech. So where you would normally be quite off the cuff and colloquial, they can structure things really well and show you like how to present an idea that you have. And so even though I don't when I do talks these days, they don't look like TED Talks because that's a completely separate kettle of fish.
For sure.
But it really helps you understand ideas that you craft and having a chronology to them and certain skills and techniques. And so since I've done that, I've been doing a lot more of the speaking stuff. COVID hit, so a lot of it's been online, which as much as I really like the system of doing things online and via Zoom, I think it's revolutionized the world. I don't think it works for keynote speeches because
I got so sick of online speeches, man.
You kind of need the interactivity there. You need a room of people to, either you can pick on someone in the crowd or you can sort of have a banter with people or there's laughter or whatever.
What's all energy? It's
energy that you feed off. And when you're staring down the barrel of the camera and just presenting with no interactivity, you completely lose that. And I think you get that feeling as well. It's a weird... I remember when COVID hit, and every DJ thought it would be a great idea to do a video live stream, which I thought was the worst fucking idea I'd ever heard in my life. I'm like, all they've done is taken the worst part of a nightclub and live streamed it. You know what I mean? Like, people go to clubs, why? They like to socialize with their friends, they like to drink, they like to take drugs, like whatever it is. And the music's kind of in the background. They might talk about like, oh, I want to see this DJ. But to be honest, that's more for signaling purposes than they actually want to see the DJ. No one gives a shit, right?
Yeah.
And so what these DJs were doing, I think because their ego was bigger than...
they thought people were coming for them.
They thought people were, so like, oh, well, I'll just set up a camera and I'll just DJ for 3 hours and everybody will tune in. No, nobody will tune in. And everybody now knows how useless a DJ is at a club.
Yeah. Just hit playlist.
Yeah, well, now we're just getting out the Spotify playlist and a case of gin.
Yeah, 100%. But no, it's because I agree 100% on it has revolutionized the world and meetings and stuff way more efficient, all that cool stuff. But yeah, I agree. I think I did a bunch of presentations over COVID. I'm doing it in person now. It's 1,000 times better in person.
Oh yeah,
way more work, but like you feed off the energy.
Yeah,
they're laughing. I did a presentation to 300 people, but it was through a weird platform. I did it through Zoom. I couldn't see a single one of their face. So I was just presenting to no one.
Yeah, that's it.
There were 300 people there, but I assume half of them were probably like doing their work while they were watching it.
Yeah.
They're not paying full attention.
Yeah. Even if they were paying full attention, I think the loss of that energy just means that you can't gauge how people are enjoying it or anything like that. So I tend to, if I can, try to get people to do, if it has to be on Zoom, like if it's in another country or something, try and get them to do a moderated Q&A in which you can have periods of 7 or 10 minutes where you just talk and don't shut up. But the fact that there's somebody there for you to bounce ideas off and, have a bit of a chuckle if you make a joke, it just changes the dynamic so much more.
Yeah, for sure. It's, even when I did it, like they didn't even intro me. They were like, all right, Brian, are you ready? Yep, go. And I was like, oh. Okay. Versus a in-person talk where they go, oh, Byron Dempsey, blah, 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 let's welcome up. They stand clapping, music comes on, you run up on the stage. So yeah, I think there's massive benefits, but also
we were talking before about opportunity costs. And I think that Zoom is interesting in the sense that, people are starting to use it now more than ever for obvious reasons. And everybody kind of thinks it's shitty or it's not as good a version as having a meeting or, whatever it is. But I think we were talking before about opportunity costs. I think what they've failed to realize is that without it, the opportunity cost would be that there are a lot of meetings and conferences and things that just wouldn't happen.
Exactly.
And I'm not even talking about during COVID. I just mean normally.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been, I've done talks to businesses recently that certainly wouldn't have flown me out from Australia to the US because that would have cost too much money. They probably wouldn't have even had a speaker anyway because they don't have the budget for it. If it was a physical event, they'd have to hire a hall. They'd have to, like all those kinds of things. So the thing that was unanticipated with it is there's a bunch of really good conversations going around now that wouldn't have happened other than for that.
Exactly.
So you got to take the good with the bad, I think. And again, it's hard to see that opportunity cost because it's not something that we look for naturally. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a great example. I think it goes back to what we were saying before, positive, negative. You can turn the negatives into a positive or a growth or whatever. But yeah, opportunity cost is always a big one. Like, for example, I do my podcast in person. The opportunity cost is I could have some massive American guests on the show. And I've had them offer.
Yeah.
I could get some huge names on, but I'm like, no, I want to do my podcast in person because very, very few people in the world just do in person because everyone's gone to Zoom now.
Yeah.
I think conversations are way better. I think that I can control the audio quality. The videos work way better online in person.
Yeah. They look better as well.
It's just way more work because I've got.
I think it's also a signaling thing because I do all mine. I do in person. I'm not all mine. I've done a few of them, but I do them in person as well because, A, for the energy type thing, but also because you present a higher quality of work. I think,
100%.
And it makes you look like you're more serious than like, I just kind of Zoom called Jonathan Haidt, while he wasn't wearing pants in his bathroom, or some shit like that.
Especially because everyone has a podcast now, as Same Bunny is, and it's true. A lot of people, not that that's a bad thing.
No, but it is low hanging fruit, and you've got so many channels now that have those Zoom conversations with the shitty audio, and you can watch it crackle. You do set yourself apart if you do it in person, I think.
Yeah, and I'm like, well. And my logic is, as I continue to grow, let's say I'm in Brisbane for a month, I'm hoping people will be like, oh, he's only here for a month. Let's get on the show real quick.
Yeah.
This is our only opportunity. I'm coming down for Sydney for a week. Let's meet up. Let's grab coffee and come on the show or something. So I'm trying to build that scarcity as well.
Yeah.
And look, in
Definitely.
Sydney, there's 4 million people here. I can find cool people to interview.
Yeah,
I have no
absolutely,
shortage of cool, interesting people. But yeah, I think that's a great example. My opportunity costs by only doing it in person means I do miss out on getting some huge guests on that could grow the podcast. I could be at way more downloads, way more followers, but I prefer doing it in person. I think it's so much better.
No, I think you're onto something good here. Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know. I did a few during COVID, and man, it was kind of depressing because you jump on, they're like, all right, we ready? I'm like, oh yeah, did you want to, I normally have a chat like I did with you before.
Yeah.
Like 20, 30 minutes, have a chat with them. And then afterwards, we chat for a little bit afterwards. But Zoom was like, you get on and you're off.
Yeah.
It's just another podcast for them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think being able to look at the opportunity cost is a really powerful thing. And I've spoken about it quite a bit on this podcast.
Yeah.
I like to talk about the opportunity cost of university or the opportunity cost of
That's a really interesting topic. I mean, what do you think about... well, I guess that's a bit linked to expectations as well, because we still have that expectation of young people. We, not you and I, but maybe the parents and the peers of those people that you need to go down that path of going to university and doing X, Y, Z. The path dependency for certain jobs. It's almost as though university is kind of like a test in path dependency for people. Do you know what I mean? Such that if you have this university degree, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be any better than this person at doing a job, but we know that you can commit to this, and you have staying power and all that sort of stuff. So it's like a litmus test. Like it's not even. So you get people coming out of university and doing like some liberal arts degree. It's just like a signal of commitment to something, but they're not actually qualified for anything.
Well, I just don't think
student debt and all this bullshit.
I don't think you have to pay 40 grand and 3 years of your life to do that.
Yeah.
I'm actually working on a project. The name's still in work, called the Intentional Gap Year. It's a project between high school and university to discover yourself, to meet amazing people, to have workshops, or have personal development stuff, or just have parties. I want to partner with festivals and clubs and just foster this awesome environment where they can travel, they can work, they can do internships, they can get work experience, they can have fun, drink, party, just have an awesome year to figure out who you are, because so many people just jump into it.
I would be surprised if they knew after a year. I mean, I don't know why we expect 18-year-olds to know exactly what they want to be doing when they're 50, which is what a university course pretty much predetermines for you.
Yeah.
And I think you can. There was some study done where, I was reading about the other week, that was like if you see what university degree someone does with something like 70% accuracy, you can work out exactly where they end up when they're 50, what kind of job they're doing, with some degree of accuracy at least. And I think that's really weird and deterministic, and like I don't like the idea for myself. I mean, it might be some solace to other people depending on how much certainty that you like in your life. And I know as humans we do like certainty, but at the age of 18, knowing exactly what you want to do, I don't know that nobody does. I think there are people that do, but I don't think that we should expect everyone to, just because a few people do.
Well, it's funny you say this, because this is essentially what my podcast is about.
Right. Okay.
Like I try to avoid this conversation. No, I love talking about it, but I just feel like I talk about it too much. I've had people talk
Am I opening up Pandora's box here?
This is I mean, you're talking about, it's funny you talk about it without knowing context of this podcast, because it shows just everyone I meet has the same opinion. It's crazy. The amount of people who go, oh yeah, I did a university degree, but now I do this. And that's why I'm trying to create this program.
Yeah.
A place that gives them, and the dropout rate is ridiculously high. I also think younger people have this Americanized expectation of university. There's going to be this place where I can go, I can meet friends, I can party, I can study, I can do all this stuff. And then in Sydney, they just stay at home, they catch a 45-minute train into the city, they do their degree, they come back, and then they do half their stuff online. Most of my friends don't have university friends. I know so many people who finish a degree. My latest episode, Annie, I just recorded it on Friday. She's like, I'm in my 5th year, I don't have a single friend at university. All my friends are outside of it.
Because that is supposed to be an extracurricular benefit of going to university, which I would understand on paper is kind of like you do make networks, and I had a friend who just recently went to film school, and I know that
film school is all about network.
That's literally it.
That's
do you know
why
what I mean?
go.
Because I'm almost certain that this guy made better films before he went into film school than the third years before he even signed up.
Yeah.
And he was umming and ahhing about going, and I said, well, look, I don't actually think you're going to learn a hell of a lot theoretically, but you'll probably meet some people who might be able to help you out down the line a bit or something like that. So that's a real extracurricular benefit if it's provided. But if you're saying that people are going through university and not making any of these connections, and I mean, there are obviously university degrees that need to be around, like medicine. we need some of these engineering,
architecture,
STEM fields. I get it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But anything else? I mean, I think that you talked about the opportunity cost. Like, how far would you get if you just went straight into the workforce? And worked for someone for free for 2 years?
Oh, dude, just speaking my language here. This is what I promote. And just real quick, like even on medicine, I had someone, and he was just like, "Oh, my mum's been a doctor for 20 years, and she thinks a medicine degree should not be 10 years. She thinks it should be like 1 year of study, and then you just spend years and years in the hospital learning." On the ground,
right?
You're not operating, you're not doing anything. You're just learning, right?
You're learning on the job.
Even my friend, she's a second year nurse, and the first year they say is always a grind because you just study. But now she's in the hospital, and she's like, I finally feel like I'm actually learning something. I'm not writing essays on different bullshit topics which I'll probably never have to deal with. I'm actually helping people and assisting, and I'm learning how to be a nurse. I agree. That's how I do it.
A lot of that first year stuff is a lot of gatekeeping though as well, isn't it? When they're trying to weed out those who are not,
for sure.
But I mean, a lot of it is, I'm sure is completely unnecessary. I mean, I probably, if most people in corporate are honest, that if they did work 9 hours a day or something like that, they could probably all go on Wednesday, like home on Wednesday. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
I hear that from a lot of people that work in corporate and stuff like that.
They're just there because they have to.
Well, there's an expectation that the business puts upon them that we have a 5-day working week. This is what you do. Even if you're sitting there on Facebook for a couple of hours, or technically you have to be available for this amount of time.
Yeah.
And I think universities can be the same in a way because they're a business at the end of the day. And if you want people to go through 3 or 4 years of something, this is the workload that you're going to get. A lot of the time as well, designed during times where people worked and went to uni. I mean, I went to uni 20 years ago now, and I was doing psychology. It was 5 days a week, not every hour of the day, but I'd have a second job. I work at a bar, and that paid my rent. I lived on my own. No kid can do that these days. It's impossible. You can't do uni 5 days a week, work at a bar for a couple of nights, and rent a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm sorry, right? It's just too expensive.
Well, I know people who are doing that, and they're struggling.
Of course, they were struggling.
No savings.
It's ridiculous, right?
Every week they're waiting for the paycheck. It's tough.
So a lot of the kids that I speak to that are in early stage uni or in late stage just live with their parents because it's more economical, and they still have jobs and they work and they're busy all the time. But all of that gets spent on going out rather than it would get spent on rent. I mean, surely you could compress a little bit of that time to allow these people to have more time to earn money, gain independence, go out, make their own connections, and be furthered in their career rather than being 25 years old, living at home.
Yeah. What also favours people, and I see this a lot with my uni friends who have a few uni friends, they'll have friends who are a lot wealthier than them and live in like the northern suburbs and stuff, which is the wealthy part of Sydney. Or they can move out and their parents pay for all the rent. They don't even have to work. So they get 7 days of workless just to work on their uni degree, which gives them a massive advantage over someone who has to work, 5 days and then work all weekend just to cover their expenses. And then they just get higher and higher and they get into the degrees and it's, not closes, it widens the gap of inequality. But it's an interesting topic. It's something I'm very passionate about. I disagree with what you said. I agree with how you said just throw them in the workforce for 2 years, internships, work experience. That's what I'm all about. Obviously, yes, medicine, engineering. There are degrees that you can't do that, but there's a lot nowadays you can do.
Absolutely, but and it's not a physical barrier here. It's completely a mental one that society has imposed upon young people. So the expectation is such that if you don't go down this particular path, the path dependency is very much in situ for any career path. And so in some way you would be looked down upon for deciding to throw yourself in the workforce. And there's also a little bit of an element of fear to it. And there's also a contextual element where they say, if you wanted to get into, working in sales or something like that, and, rather than doing a course or doing business at UTS or something, you said, well, I'm going to go work for a small sales company. I'm going to work for them for free for a year. The fact that we think about that in the context of, people are getting paid for this, but I'm not getting paid for this, that would be a stupid thing to do. I mean, maybe I could take a low salary or something, but you're like, but the opportunity cost, if you were going to university...
You're paying.
Yeah, you're paying, right? So you're actually better off financially. And now, if that is going to give you an inroad into some sales company or whatever that might, 2 years down the track, put you in a better position than you were before.
Yeah.
I mean, people, I think the half-life of a lot of degrees these days is 5-7 years.
Yeah.
By the time you're in the industry and you're working your way up, it's all about people that that will do you favors, jobs that you can get, ladder climbing, all that kind of bullshit. I mean,
it's your network.
Yeah.
And your experience, right? I think I couldn't agree more. And I talk about it all the time. Like, I put out content saying you should be willing to work for free. Reach out to people, work for free, go work for them. And people are like, oh, that's a privilege, that's all this stuff. I totally understand that. But at the same time, I do think I'm privileged just to be born in Australia and to have that. Yeah. But then also, most people in Australia have the same sort of living standard as me. I'm not upper class. Yeah. I'm standard.
Yeah.
I've got a house, I've got food, I've got water, I've got great parents. That's kind of what I've got. And so when people are like, oh, that's a privilege, I do get that. But also, as you mentioned, people will they'll go, oh, you shouldn't work for free, but you'll go pay $50,000 for 3 years of your life to get a degree, which isn't going to guarantee you anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Whereas I'm like, well, this won't guarantee you anything anyway, but it could be a door that opens up to 1,000 other doors behind it. You never know.
Also, its privilege isn't really an argument why not to do something.
Yeah.
Everybody is resourceful within the privilege that they have. No matter where you go in the world, they're going to do their best. Just like you said before, those that live in the North Shore and their parents pay for their XYZ or whatever it is, they're going to take that opportunity because it's presented to them.
For sure. I would
as much as anyone would.
I would.
So it's just working out how to be resourceful and what the best strategy is for you long term. And if that's not necessarily doing the business course and just wanting to get out there and work, beside the fact that it seems to make more financial sense, there appears to be less security on face value.
Yeah.
I think that might be the big psychological hump that people need to get over.
It's also the society standards of, when you say I'm doing a business degree, people go, oh, cool, that's awesome, that you feel like you're on track. But if you say, oh, I'm trying to start a business, or like I'm doing this or whatever, it's a bit scary to say that. Because
well, we're getting to the point now where there are some degrees that were highly sought after 20 years ago that if you got one now, it wouldn't raise an eyebrow.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that will be a tipping point with people who just walk out with a business degree or communications or whatever the fuck it is, right? And expect everyone to throw jobs at them. And they don't. I mean, I think somewhere I think it's Denmark. I was speaking to a friend who actually lives over there. They've got a highly well-funded education system over there such that all of their tertiary education is paid for regardless of what you do. And I have a friend who's doing a medicine degree over there, and he was saying that they've got too many people with medical degrees.
Wow.
There aren't that many jobs for doctors. And they're like, what we really need is bricklayers.
There you go.
And they're getting paid more than doctors.
Supply and demand.
So, yeah, exactly, right? And so you would think that over time that supply and demand would at least drive demand to different areas. I guess when you start funding some things and unfunding others, you kind of with a natural selection of that a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, Denmark, Finland, they've all got I think Finland's the number one education system in the world.
Right.
It's interesting the way they
what's that scale? How do they decide that? Like, what's it based on? The amount of funding per capita or something? Or
it's based on a few things. I read a book on it. I actually had her on the podcast. She did a critical analysis of Australia's education system.
Right.
And she did actually a really interesting double page in the book, and it had a grid, and it just had Australia and Finland, and it compared the two. And it was like the average wage of an Australian teacher, $70,000. The average wage of a Finland teacher, $110,000.
Right.
And so the way they perceive teachers is like a very high status, very important role. Whereas here, it's like anyone can be a teacher. It's like a 65 ATAR or 70 ATAR.
Right.
And then by the time you're 21, you're a mature age student, you could just go apply and be a teacher. And so the standard often means the smarter people won't be a teacher because they perceive it as a low standard.
Yeah.
Therefore, the smarter people...
Or a B plan.
They become lawyers, become engineers, become what society considers successful. And then we end up getting people who aren't quite as motivated to be teachers because it's like a plan B or it's a plan C. Whereas in Finland, they flip it. And they give it a high... And so that's one of the big reasonings, among other things. But,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole conversation on the education system. I mean, we're getting low on time, but I guess, is there anything you wanted to cover? You talk about a whole bunch of different stuff. Is there anything you wanted to cover before we get into the final question?
No, not particularly. Just shoot with the final questions if you want. Yeah.
All right, let's shoot then. What would your number one piece of advice be to an 18-year-old or to the younger generation? What would be the number one piece of advice you would give them?
The number one piece of advice that I would give, and I don't think this is for everybody because everybody's different, but it might be relevant to some, is probably just to hark back to the don't be reliant on path dependency of things, and don't think that one way of doing things is the only way, and don't think that you should know what you want to do really early.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 38 now and I still don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
So, and I like that though, because I like the only consistent thing in my life is inconsistency. And I do have some values that I live by. I like autonomy and things like that. And I like being my own boss to a certain extent. But I don't like knowing what's going to happen next year.
Dude,
and
I'm the same.
Yeah, I like to commit to not knowing.
The 6 human needs, have you heard that?
No, I don't think so.
There's a study done and they credit the 6 human needs. The first 2 human needs are certainty. The second one is variety.
Right.
So you want to have some level of certainty within a life,
Yeah.
but then you can't just be certain about everything. You need to have variety in your life.
Yeah.
Because I'm the same. I would hate knowing where I'm going to be in 12 months. I love the fact it's so unpredictable.
Yeah.
But I love the certainty of I wake up and I go to a cafe at 5:30 in the morning, and then I go gym at this time.
Yeah.
And then I come to the office. And then each day is always different, but I've got a few certain routines here and there.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, having food, shelter, all that sort of stuff would be a great certainty.
Yeah.
But then the variety within that
Exactly.
spectrum would be,
Well, Hooky, thanks so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. Thanks for the invitation. I really enjoyed it. It was
My
fantastic.
pleasure. And for anyone who wants to get in contact with you, follow you along, where's the best place to go? I know you got your TED Talk as well.
Yeah. If anyone wants to find me, I'm usually at the Barber Shop, which is a bar in the city.
Yeah.
Most nights of the week, drinking martinis.
There you go.
Other than that, you can link to my socials below.
I'll link Instagram and stuff all below. But otherwise, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, man. Shake my hook.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this entire episode of the podcast. The fact that you would sit there and listen to me for so long is awesome, and I love you for that. Thank you so much. Just real quick, I am starting to speak at schools a lot more frequently now. So if you're in Australia, specifically Sydney, and either you're a student, maybe you're a teacher, or you've got a brother or sister in school, or you have any connections at all and you want me to come speak at a school or any presenting things, I am looking to ramp that up a lot. I've got a really cool school talk I've been working on for a few months now. I've just started speaking at a bunch of schools. It's been going really well. So yeah, go to the link in the show notes or go to drivenyoung.com and you'll see school talks up the top, and just click on that and send me an email. Otherwise, yeah, figure out any way to get in contact with me. I've also got the Sexual Assault podcast, which is now live with Brent Sanders. Go check that out. It's called Consent and Consequences. That is a Driven Young Productions podcast. It's something I'm very proud of. So there's lots going on. Definitely go check it all out. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening to this entire episode, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and week.